I was talking to a client the other day, and she just turned 59 and a half, and so we're now able to do some different IRA strategies with her and things like that. And if you're at that age, this is going to be super important for you because she's not a 59 and a half. Last year, she panicked, and not saying she panicked. She was just thinking strategically. The market had a dip, and she moved all of her money to the G fund. She had around 572,000 in her TSP, and so she moved all of it to the G fund. And we're now talking. She's 59 and a half, and she's like, "All right, I want to do some different things." And as we're walking through it, and as we're walking through her, what she can do, because we believe in having a protected bucket and a risk bucket once you're over 59 and a half, and making sure you strategically place your assets. And so we're going over that with her. She was like, "Well, dang, Will, should I have moved my money all to the G fund?" And I showed her that if she would have just moved a portion of her TSP, just say 200,000 to a protected bucket to the G fund, and left the remaining 300,000 in the TSP, she lost out on around $82,000 in interest gain just by not leaving some portion of her money in the C fund. And so one of the things we like to always talk about is like you want to make sure when it comes to risk that you have a strategy. So if you have a strategy in your TSP, just put one in the chat, right? Because a lot of times people think they do, but if you have a risk strategy that you can rely on based on whatever the news says, you don't panic. You have a risk strategy. Put one in the chat because I want to see how many of y'all really do strategize around your TSP. Because what I've noticed, and I get it, because you're not like financial advisor or anything like that, or day traders, or anything like that. Oftentimes people don't have a strategy, and that's okay. That's why you attend workshops like this, right? And so what we're going to do today is just talk about risk without panic. So share my screen. And so when it comes to having a risk strategy without panic, you want to know how to manage, you want to know how to manage, grow your money safely, and take into account inflation. So I was talking to a client, and one of the things she said to me is like, I like to be able to touch what I know, which I know I have. I'm just old school, money under the mattress. So a lot of folks, I know my grandmother was like that, is just like, look, I want my money under the mattress. I don't care what the market's doing. Look, I just don't trust the market, right? And so one of the things that you have to keep in mind when it comes to saving money and keeping money safe, it's a good strategy, right? But you have to have a strategy around it because a lot of folks, what they do is they move money to the G fund, right? And if you've ever moved money to the G fund, just put G fund in the chat. If you've ever moved all your money to the G fund because you were afraid of what was going to happen in the market, just put G fund in the chat. And so the problem with the G fund is this. Yes, you don't lose any money. You don't lose any money on the screen. If you have $200,000, you're never going to go down to 198 or 150 in the G fund. But there are two big things that oftentimes that will be are like holes in the pocket when it comes to G fund. One is just the average inflation rate. Now, the average inflation rate over the last 50 years is 3.26. And oftentimes that's what's communicated on the news when people talk about it, when you see different videos, some different places they talk about what the average inflation rate has been, which is 3.26, right? And so even with that, the G fund is still at a 1% loss, right? And it's not like a physical loss is or like a loss on the screen, is a loss of buying power, right? And so that's why we when we talk to different federal employees and they're retired, oftentimes somebody might say, "Well, I only need 1,000 a month for my TSP." Then we do an annual review, like, I need to up that by $600, right? I'm like, why? Well, I don't know. I'm just spending more. The reason why you're spending more is because inflation, right? Look at gas prices aren't necessarily considered inflationary, but gas prices are much higher. So you have to have your money grow to outpace inflation, right? So the base level inflation is 3.26. But the one that's often not talked about is healthcare inflation. Now, healthcare inflation over that same time period is at 5.3. But we've seen over the last couple of years, health insurance costs has gone up more than 5%. I know my health insurance costs are ridiculous right now, right? So, and I barely use it, but it's something that I have to pay every single month, and the cost of it goes up. I was talking to a retiree the other day, and she was in her she's not a client, but she just reached out to us through our, I don't think our YouTube or something. And she was just she had called the office and she was just wanted to have a meeting with me. And she was 74, and what she is 74. And what she was saying, she was like, I already did all the stuff with my TSP and everything, but can you help me with my FEHB? Like my cost is just so high. And like I laughed, and she was like, "What you laughing at?" And I was like, I was like, "It's your boy." And she started laughing. And I was just like, "Yeah, I mean, it's just healthcare costs have gone up tremendously this year for everybody across the board. We're all feeling it." And I was like, "There's nothing I could do." I'm like, that's just what the costs are." And so here she is. She retired when she was 62. She's now 12 years into retirement, and inflation is squeezing her when it comes to the healthcare costs. And so one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're growing your money is you want to make sure that you're growing your assets to at least outpace inflation at the bare minimum, right? And so here's the thing. There's two ways to get risk wrong. A lot of times folks, what they say is, "Oh, I want to put all my money in the G fund," which is a too safe trap. Because again, going back to the inflation screen, with the G fund, you're losing big time when it comes to inflation, especially when it comes to healthcare inflation. And then the C fund, oftentimes if people are 100% in the C fund, they panic. And when you panic, you oftentimes miss when the market comes back. I was talking to a guy yesterday. He had over a million in his TSP, doing well, right? And he was just thinking about moving money to the G fund. Not a bad strategy because he's played it so he took so much risk as he was working, which is a good thing. But moving everything to the G fund wouldn't be the best strategy. But also at his age, if there's a market correction, what a lot of people are predicting with the way the bond market is looking, then he could lose up to 30% of that, which also he's not trying to do, right? And so you want to make sure you have a strategy because 100% in one of two places, this isn't the best thing. And so here's a snapshot of the G fund, the C fund, and the I fund over the last 10 years. So if you look at the G fund, you see the 2.8, you see the C fund is at 15, and the I fund is at 9. Right. And so a lot of people that want to move money to the G fund, you definitely don't want to miss out on that 15% 10-year average that the C fund has. You just don't want to miss out. If you look at the 1 year, the 1 year is at 31%, which is astronomical. And of course, at some point that's going to correct itself. The market has been running hot for the last 4 years, almost since 2022. Yeah, 4 years. The market has been hot ever since then. And so at some point there'll be a correction, right? But you don't want to miss out on the good years. And this is what I was telling the lady who last year she moved her 500,000 to the G fund. I showed her the C fund. I was like, if you would have just left 300,000 in that account, that's almost between 85 to $90,000 that you would have gained just in interest because of that 31%. And so she just was like, "Mrs. Smith, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just so afraid." And so because she didn't, she moved everything to the G fund. She barely made any interest last year because she had it all in the G. So if that's you, we want to make sure you have a strategy, right? And so what we do at Fed Legacy, we just believe in making sure you have a growth bucket and a protected bucket. And so a lot of times we realize people are asking the wrong questions, right? Should I move it all to the G? Should I move it all to the C? Should I wait until the market settles? You can never really know when the market's going to settle, right? When you study the market trends, there's days, most days in the market are up 1%, up 2, down 1, up 1, up 1, down 2. It's very small blips. But then there's a couple of days every year where the market has a major swing. Like, oh, the market's up 6% today. The market's up 4% today. And or the market's down 5% today. And but if you miss those days, then you're stuck. And so you never want to really try to time the market because that's not what you I mean, the people that study the market can't even time the market. So what makes you think you can time it, right? You just want to make sure you have, or any of us, me too, stress time the market. You just want to make sure you have a strategy, right? And so what job should each part of your money do is the question, right? And so what we have is we have our finish line risk structure, which we also call our financial house. And so in our financial house, we want to make sure you have three layers to it. We want to make sure you have a protected bucket or protected aspect of the house. We want to make sure you have your tax and inflation aspect of the house. We call that the walls. And then we want to make sure you have your growth aspect as well. We call that the roof. So let me break down what these three different structures mean though. Okay. When it comes to the protected structure, we call that the foundation, just like your house, right? If your foundation is messed up, the whole house can collapse. And this is oftentimes what happens when folks don't have a proper retirement structure. So one of the first things we focus on when it comes to building your financial house is we look at, okay, how much income do you think you will need? I was talking to a married couple days ago. He's retiring from Department of Corrections, Bureau of Corrections, I think it's called. And so he's retiring early, law enforcement. And so he's 57. He's trying to 57. And what it's not that's the latest they can retire. So he pushed it to the end. But his wife is younger. And even with him retiring, there's still a little bit of a gap there. And so the first thing we did was we talked about how much money do you need? And for them, it was about $1,300 a month. And so what we did was we took the money, we set aside money so make sure that that $1,300 a month plus an inflation increase every year was set aside. And so we did that. We said, okay, how much money would it take for you to have $1,300 a month plus an inflation kicker every year? Because you got to give yourself a cost of living increase. How much money would that take? And so then we ran the numbers, we put that money aside so that that's there because at the end of the day, if that money's not there, what most people do is they just start taking money from the TSP with no discipline. And so you want to make, and then that causes uh, you start paying more in taxes. Your IRMA numbers can go up, all those different things. So you want to make sure you plan that. So that's the first thing we did because if your income is not solid, then you don't have peace of mind, right? While you're working right now, you have peace of mind because you know you have a check that's coming in every 2 weeks. And so when you're retired, you want to make sure that check is coming in every month to the amount that will give you and your spouse or your family peace of mind. So that's the first thing we do with the foundation. We don't want that money stuck up in the C fund uh, where it can go down 20% because that will cause you to lose peace of mind, right? So that's the first thing we do. That's the protected money. It could also be money where it's like maybe you're a federal employee, but your spouse doesn't have a lot of money saved, and so you'll be taking care of both of y'all retirements. So you want to make sure there's money set aside in case something happens to you that they have enough to live in case you don't have life insurance. You want to make sure that money is not subject to market loss because God forbid market crash, you pass, they're left with a deficit that they couldn't make, they can't maintain their stock quality of living. Now we have problems, right? Another example of the protected bucket. And so the next we have what we call the walls. That's our tax and inflation strategy. This is more so not necessarily a bucket, but this is where we get strategic. We want to make sure that the money that you have is outpacing inflation. Talked about that already. And then we also want to make sure that as that money is sitting there, we're also doing some different proper tax planning with it because the biggest bill you're going to pay in retirement is the IRS. But you want to make sure that as you pay that bill, you limit how much that is. And then the last is, and I won't go deep into that because we've done plenty of webinars. If you want to check out our YouTube channel, you can check out our YouTube channel. We have tons and tons and tons of videos on tax strategy. Also, if you want to book a call with us, we can go over with you through our TSP finish line process, uh, proper tax strategies. And if you want to book a call, you could just let us know in the chat or drop plan in the chat and we will make sure that we reach out to you personally and set up a call with you to go through the tax stuff. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Then the last piece is growth, which is the roof, right? And metaphorically, the roof takes on all the damage. If you live in an environment that has heavy hail, hail hits the roof, is damage. Wind, damage. Heavy snows, roof, damage. And so with the roof, we look at it like this. This is where all the growth money goes. This is where the C fund money grows. This is where the S fund, I fund money goes in the roof. Because you want to still be taking risk, but it's about the right amount of risk, right? And so we want to make sure you're there. So we have there's a rule, it's called the rule of 100. We call it at Fed Legacy the federal rule of 100 because we flip it a little bit. So the regular rule of 100 is you take your age, you minus it by 100, you take 100 minus it by your age, and then that's the percentage that you want to have protected. And so in Fed Legacy, we flip it, right? We want to make sure we take 100 we take 100 and we look at, okay, what's the amount of risk that you want to take, right? And so we put the risk in the higher number. And the reason why we do that is because when it comes to your a federal employee, you're very different than your neighbor or your cousin, right? Because your cousin and your neighbor or your aunt, your uncle, whoever, friends, they don't have a pension. And so when the normal rule of 100 leans more towards the conservative side of things, like you need to protect more than you have at risk. With federal employees, it's different because federal employees are not using you're not using your TSP to live off of. You're getting your pension, you're getting plus social security, and then your TSP oftentimes, and this is 9 out of 10 times, is extra money or the smallest of the deductions that you're taking. So, for example, your pension might be 3,000, your social security might be 2,000, and then your TSP might be 1,500, right? That's oftentimes how I see it, right? Now the numbers are a little different, but the percentage wise. Whereas for someone that's in the private sector, is like social security, 2,000, 401k, 4,000, God willing, right? And they have to make that money stretch for the rest of their life. You all are very, very different. And so you got to make sure you're growing your money in that aspect. So again, when it comes to to the G fund, here's an example of someone with 325,000 in the G fund, in the G fund over, I believe this is a 5-year period. You're looking at the end of that 5-year period, you're looking at 389,000 value over that next 5 years with the C fund return. Well, with the proper structure using the rule of 100 is at 612,000. That's a big difference. That's a big difference when it comes to money and making sure your income is straight and then your growth money is straight, right? So you want to make sure you have a proper strategy. And some of the things that people ask is like, but what if the market crashes, right? You never sell low, you don't sell low, you ride it out. You don't, if the market, it's so for, and what this means is, and again, this is case by case, but overall, especially if you're working, if you're retired, it's a little different. You want to make sure you have a conversation. But if you're working, and let's say you have 100% of your money in the C, the market goes down 20%. Moving your money from the C to the G at that point, we like to say is just locking yourself in the basement. So let's say you have 100,000, just keeping the numbers easy. Market drops 20%, it's down to 80. Don't move your money to the G fund unless, especially if you're working. Now, if you're retired, is a different thing because your risk tolerance might be a little different, but you know you want to ride it out if the market drops like that so that you can reap the benefits of those upswings because again like I mentioned earlier when you're trying to time the days that could be very 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 tricky. Tom does the work. Tom does the work. Like the lady last year when the market kind of went down a little bit, she moved all of it to the G. When I showed her the 31% in the C, if she allowed Tom to do the work, she would have had, if she left all of it in the C fund, she would have had over $100,000 return. If she would have did 300, it would have been about 80, right? So you want to let time do the work, especially if you're still working. And if you're retired, but you have your income set aside, a bucket for your income, it doesn't matter what the other bucket is doing because what's satisfying your day-to-day needs is here. You can still let time do the work, right? And this is why having a plan is so important because the plan helps you execute. It's funny because when like CNBC or CNN or any of those channels have these market days where the market goes down, a lot of our clients now they're still nervous. They text me like, "I'm good, right? I just followed the strategy, right?" We get those comments on stuff and emails and stuff, and it's right. It's like, yeah, you're good, right? And so you want to make sure you have a plan, right? And so when risk is built right, you stay calm. You know your money's protected in the right way, right? You know the income that you need is going to be there. You know what keeps growing, and it's fun to watch. Like I said, you know where your income is coming from. You don't touch it during downturns. and you know what your next move should be. And so if you want to have a conversation with us, like like we've had with like the lady I was talking about yesterday who had the 575, and we're getting ready to structure some different things for her, create an income plan for her, create a risk strategy for her, create a tax strategy for her, even a long-term care strategy. If that's something you're interested in, you could book our retirement readiness review. And what we'll do is we'll go over your TSP allocations, your income needs, your protected money strategy, your growth and inflation defense, and then we'll just help you map out your next moves. And what we'll do is we'll put everything into our retirement analyzer system. And it don't matter if you call us back in 2 years, 3 years, we'll still have your numbers there and we'll adjust that on the fly. And so we really spend we map out 4 calls when we do this. We spend 4 calls with you. The first one is just doing a we do a retirement readiness review, right? And what that mean assessment. And what that is we ask you questions based on where you at when it comes to how long you think your savings will last. Because one of the things we ask folks is like, what's your biggest fear in retirement? And oftentimes people say running out of money. So we assess where you are with that in your mind, right? No right or wrong answers. We go over how confident are you with your tax strategy? How confident are you with your long-term care strategy? And we rank you based on what you say, right? And there's no right or wrong answer. And then we take that information, ask you a couple other questions, and then we help create a retirement analyzer for you that we present to you on the second call, which is our strategy session. And all we do is we just present the raw data. It's like, okay, here's what your retirement is going to look like just from a raw perspective. And the system will tell you, it'll tell you if there's red flags or there's not, right? If some folks we meet with and there's nothing but green flags, like great. All we need to do now is just do some different tax strategy on this, and you're good to go. You don't need any extra income. You're good. Your long-term care stuff checks out. And so we do that on the second call. But if there's a gap that needs to be filled, on the third call, we'll show you how to do that. And on the fourth call, we'll help you set everything up. And so because it's a 4 call structure and we've really spent a lot of time, right now we're limited to 10 families per month, right? Between me and 3 of my other advisors. We limit to 10 per month because we want to make sure that we spend a lot of time with folks. And so if that's something you're interested in, just make sure you go to the link. I believe my team put the link in the chat, or just let us know in the chat. Put plan in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get you straight. So now I want to go to Q&A. Is there any questions that you all have that we can answer? One of the questions that we get a lot is how much should you put in your Roth TSP if you're still working? Um, that's a case by case question, but you should definitely have some money going into the Roth TSP. I can't say how much because it depends on your tax situation, but you want to make sure that you have something going to the Roth TSP, especially if you're still working, because he's getting ready to retire at 62. When I met him, he was 51, and he didn't have anything going, and somebody's doubting on his investments. He's like, you know what, Mr. Smith, I got to get that right. I got to get this Roth TSP right because he's retiring 52, 56. He's retiring in 7 years, 6 years, 6 years. And, I'm like, yeah, man, put as much as you can into that Roth TSP so that when you retire, you have all that tax-free money. And so we ran the numbers. And if he did it, he'll have about 200,000 based on what he's putting in, like in his Roth, projected wise. That's 200,000 tax-free money. And so it's like he was just like, yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? And so you want to make sure you have some level of a Roth strategy in place because it's super, super important to have. Another thing, uh, okay, I see Adam asked, when it comes to the C fund, what is the C fund? The C fund is the S&P 500 index. So the C fund does the best because the C fund compromises of the top 500 companies in America. But some of the top holdings, when you look at it, are some of the companies we use every day: Microsoft, Meta, uh, Apple. We all use that every day, right? Google, right? We all that is in the C fund, and so that's why that fund does the best because those are the companies that are really driving the economy. Nvidia, right? All those companies are driving the economy, And so the C fund matches those. And so that's why people really like the C fund. Okay, Nancy said, I need help with transferring from traditional to Raw. Okay, yeah, Nancy, we could do that. Nancy, are you retired or you still working? And if you and I'll put like while I wait for you to answer that. If you're still working, you just want to change your contributions to Roth, right? And I could help you. You're not retired yet, so yeah, you just want to change your contributions to Roth. You don't want to start removing money from your TSP to the Roth, your traditional to the Roth while you're working, because that can cause you to have a higher tax bill because it'll be taxed as income, right? So let's say you're making over 100,000. Let's say you make 120,000, and then you all of a sudden take 50,000 and move it to the average income for the year is 170,000 or something like that, right? And so the thing you want to do is just make sure you change the contributions, which is great. And then once you retire, then you can start doing the Roth transfers. They Once you retire, you can start doing the Roth transfers because it's going to be right. And so, like I was talking to a client the, the other day, and she retired, and her net taxable income was 12%. And so that's when she's doing her Roth conversions at that point. Any of our retirement readiness review, we go deep. It's 4 calls. We really take our time with you. And once you're done, you'll have a tax strategy mapped out, income strategy mapped out, long-term cash strategy mapped out. And it just takes away the guesswork when it comes to retirement. We've been doing this now 17 years, and we do it for us, and so we just want to make sure our people definitely retire with a strategy because it's super important. You all are, I mean, y'all are the lifeblood of the middle class. And so we got to make sure that we're passing this money on to our next generation. It's super, super important. So we're very intentional. We don't rush through this stuff. It's 4 calls. We go deep. We make sure that and we don't and there's no cost either. We do it no cost. Obviously, we hope that when you do retire, we can help you with like different tax strategy and investment strategies. And that's all like managed money stuff, but there's no fee to you upfront or anything like that. So don't think you're gonna have to pay us to do this. So we take you through those calls, make sure you're right. And if you don't go with us, that's fine. We still give you the information. We'll make sure you have it. If you have questions, you can always still reach out to us, and definitely come on these webinars. We'll keep them coming. And yeah, we're just here to support. Um, and Nancy, you said what percentage should I move to the G fund now, 3 years before retirement? Nancy, I see you put plan over there. I don't want to just tell you a percentage without knowing anything about you. And pardon me if we've already done a retirement analyzer for you. I just don't have it off the top of my head. But when we get on a call, we'll make sure we tell you exactly what percentage will help you think that through. And so, okay, all right, everybody, we'll see you all next week. And thanks for coming out.